Thank you for tuning in. I'm hoping everybody is having a lovely day. Like I said, this is the Everything Old School podcast, and my name is Marquise Marrow, and I have a special guest today, and she has a very interesting story, a very interesting talent, a very interesting gift. But at the same time, I guess that depends on who you ask. I'm sure you've come across that, correct?
Definitely.
So please introduce yourself to the world.
Well, thank you so much, Marquise. My name is Julia Mikas, and I'm an astrologer living in San Francisco, originally from New York. And I've been consulting with clients for over 10 years now.
Now, you're an astrologist.
Yes.
Okay, so a question I want to know, because I really don't know anything like this about these things, but what is the difference between an astrologist and a psychic?
Very, very good question. So, an astrologist is somebody who basically reads the symbolism of the planets in their placement along the zodiac when you were born. A psychic is somebody who can just get downloads, through their own psyche. They can just kind of see the future, foretell things on their own. You don't have to be a psychic to be an astrologer, but a lot of astrologers are psychics as well, if that makes any sense. Astrology to me is just reading a language. So it's learning how to read the symbolism, and it can be predictive as well. So you don't have to have a natural intuitive talent to be a good astrologer. But like I said, you have a lot of people who cross over in different fields.
Okay, now to become an astrologist, is that how you pronounce it, astrologist?
Both words work. It's just a matter of semantics, but both are correct.
So is this something that you or other astrologers were born with, or you have to get training, or do you go to astrology school? I mean, how does that come about?
Great question. There's so many different ways of going about it. I trained with another astrologer. I think mentoring with a more senior astrologer is an excellent way to study, just like anything in life. They do have astrology universities, Kepler College. I'm actually taking some classes in medical astrology now at Kepler. That's one place where you can go to learn astrology. And then I meet astrologers who just do self-study. They just read a lot, they research a lot on their own. So it can be as academic as you want it to be, or it could be just self-discovery, many different ways of going about it. It's a very diverse field.
That's interesting. I didn't know that there was school for astrology. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And how long have you been doing? You said 10 years?
10 years professionally, maybe studying for 13 or 14.
So when you say professionally, that means you get paid for it?
Yes, get paid for it. And primarily my pay is working with clients. So someone will send me their birth information ahead of time. I do the analysis, and then we explore questions they want to talk about. But I also make content for astrology.com and horoscope.com. So I do some content creation as well.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting as well. So how did you know that this is what you wanted to do and that you could do it? Do you call it a gift, or do you call it training, or what do you call it?
I want to demystify it a little bit, because I really believe anyone can do this. I think that it takes a certain amount of obsessiveness, because it takes a number of years before you start making any sense of what you're looking at. It's like reading a difficult language. So maybe there's some people who can do it a little bit faster than others, but I believe that this is accessible to everybody. And I also think that every single culture in this world had astrology. So every continent had people looking at the sky, because every continent had access to the sky, right? No matter where you were born, whether it was Mongolia or South America or whatever, there was a sky above you. So every culture began correlating the movements of the heavens with what was going on in Earth. And they did it in different ways. Sometimes they would do it to see when to plant crops, or sometimes they would do it to see, at the birth of a king, would this king be great? But every single culture did this. So this is all of our birthright, and we all have access to this. It just takes a certain degree of obsessiveness to want to learn it for years before you can start making some sense of it.
So So are you saying that you look at this, the stars? Is it the stars, the sky? What is it specifically that you look at to make your determination?
Hmm. Well, the classic astrological approach is to look at the planets. And the planets, as they move across the sky, it's kind of hard to see if you live in a city. I grew up in a city, so I was not aware of the planets and where they were. And I saw big buildings, that was it. But the planets, Mars, Venus, Mercury, the moon, the sun, they actually all travel across this narrow strip in the sky. And that narrow strip is called the zodiac. So there is a belt that goes across the sky of all 12 constellations, and all of our planets, even the outer planets like Uranus, Pluto, even asteroids in the Kuiper belt, they all follow the same path. Now, you can also throw in some other stars outside of the path too, if you want to do that. It's a much more traditional technique. I like playing around with it. But that is sort of the specific area of the sky that has the most activity, and watching those planets move from one constellation to the next, or make aspects to each other across the sky, whether they're opposite, whether they're right next to each other. And that's where the significations come from.
Very well spoken.
Thank you.
So is the nucleus, or is the basic thought of astrology looking in the skies and the way the sun or whatever moves, is that based on, do astrologers believe that people's moods or their behavior is based on the movement of the sun or the stars? And I ask you this question because of a lunatic, or of the werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
Once the moon is full, he becomes a werewolf.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
So
lunatic actually comes from the word luna, meaning moon. So that
right.
is a strong astrological correlation. Yes.
And when the moon is out, people get crazy. That's why they say lunatic.
Go to any hospital under a full moon. I'm going to avoid the hospitals during full moons and eclipses. That's the other crazy time where it's just all hell breaks loose. People go nuts. And also people, eclipses can bring up health problems too in people. The sun and the moon, think about how the moon impacts the oceans. Okay, your body is mostly water. So the moon is going to start moving fluids around and creating all sorts of hormonal and other biological correspondences in there too. So yeah, there are a lot of ways which we can see how these things can physically impact us. I think that from my perspective, because I can't speak for every astrologer, and there's, like I said, so much diversity in this field. It comes from so many different cultures. I'm only one voice. But I would say that astrology is the confirmation that everything is interconnected. So, there's the sense that the movements of the planets correlate to events which are happening outside of you on Earth, or even inside you, even your own moods, even your own feelings. So I think the underlying theory or philosophy here is that there's some thread of connection that interweaves everything. And that's how it works. And you can even see quantum mechanics. A lot of high level science is also seeing how molecules in one part, I think they call it the end space, can be affected by something even very, very far away. We're starting to see that, physical space is a little bit of an illusion, and that there's a lot more interconnectedness. Basically what all the mystics have been saying in pretty much every religion, everything is connected. Astrology is one practice that works with that and acknowledges that and uses that to help you glean meaning, help you sort of understand if there's a pattern going on in your life, if there's some type of thread weaving through things. If you understand where you've been, it can help you understand where you are and where you're going as well by looking into that pattern.
Okay, well, I want you to tell me about me. I'm gonna put you to the test.
Yay! This is exciting.
Now,
I love that.
have you ever been wrong?
Sure, I'm human. And I would say that, for example, it's very interesting how people will put a burden of proof on astrologers and psychic that's way heavier than they would on anyone else. The weatherman, if the weatherman is right 80% of the time, he's a genius. If you're right 80% of the time about the market, you're a genius. But if you're wrong once as an astrologer, then, so I feel like people can be a little extra tough than they are on other predictive, people in our lives. And I'm human and I make mistakes, but I think I'm confident in myself because I've been doing this for a little while. And I would love to hear your honest feedback because that helps me grow and that helps me,
Sure.
understand because I'm here to grow here always.
But and I just want you to know, it'll be honest but not judgmental.
Thank you. And I think that there's a really important nuance between those two things. And I feel that coming off you as well, that you're open-minded and curious. So thank you for bringing that open-mindedness to me and giving this a shot
Yeah.
to begin with. So everybody,
Mhm.
I have Marquise's birth information. I have nothing else from him. I just met him, just knew his name. But with astrology, we want to look at the birth date, we want to look at the year, and we want to look at the location. So that's all I had. That's all I was working on. And
Mhm.
looking at Marquise's chart off the bat, a few patterns I keep seeing here over and over again. Marquise can be a stubborn person. Marquise can really dig his heels into things, especially if Marquise feels like somebody is pushing him to doing something or is trying to change him in some way. He could be very open-minded, like what we see here, open-minded to astrology, ready to listen to me. And he is a very open-minded person, but it's like if somebody is trying to change him or push him into a certain direction, like he will dig his heels in and be like, no. He has a sense of just kind of pushing back on other people pushing on him. Let's put it that way. Marquise also has a lot of influence from this planet called Uranus. Uranus is a very eccentric planet. It is a very individualistic planet. It cannot be categorized. It cannot be put into a box. Marquise has probably always felt a little bit like an outsider, somebody sort of looking in at the rest of the herd of society and is kind of like, yeah, I'm a little out here. I'm not quite like everybody else. And he really marches to the beat of his own drummer. Now, Marquise, with this Uranian energy, again, this can also give a little bit of Marquise that stubborn quality. He doesn't like people to categorize him. He doesn't like people to compare him to others because he is very unique and he does defy categorization in many ways. And again, he doesn't like people to change him. He doesn't like people trying to bend him to their will. He's going to be willful and he's going to put up resistance to that. So that's one really strong thing that came out to me, is that really unique way. He also has a sense of being a very independent thinker. I would even call Marquise a bit provocative. Like he can be so independent in his thinking that sometimes he likes to say provocative things to even rile other people up a little bit. If people are kind of, being that outsider, he kind of likes to get people to see different perspectives, and he likes to kind of, say a few provocative things, show people different perspectives, and sometimes it might get people a little bit ruffled, but he kind of enjoys that. He likes to be a little provocative there, and that's totally fine because he is an eccentric. And with him, one of the challenges that it's actually kind of an interesting contradiction. He has a tendency sometimes to be a little bit scattered. When he's really, really involved in a task and when he's feeling inspired, he can throw himself into it. He's very black and white. He's very all or nothing. When he's done with something, he's done with it forever. Like there's a very black and white and throwing himself in a task. But the problem is that it's kind of hard for Marquise to follow a schedule that somebody else is imposing on him. It's much better for him to find himself in a situation in life where he can work on his own inspiration. Like when he's feeling it one day, he can just do a lot of work. And if he's not feeling it, take a little time off. Like he would work best if he controls his own schedule instead of, having a boss micromanage him, for example. That probably wouldn't work out so well. Do you want me to pause here or do you want me to keep going, Marquise? Because I can keep going. Or do you want to give some feedback here?
I'll give some feedback.
Okay.
Because that was good. Because a person is good when they don't say you just kept going, so your mind was rolling. So to summarize, there was some truth to that.
Okay.
To some of the things you said, there was some truth to it, and I'll just keep it. I'll keep it that way. I'm not going to give a percentage of accurate or inaccurate, but yes, there is definitely some truth to it. Um, Now, what I want to know, because you're indoors, correct?
Yeah, indoors, yes.
So you're not outside looking at the skies or the trees.
No, I'm not.
So what?
Yeah.
So what gave you the inspiration, or what gave you the vibe to tell me about myself? Since
Sure.
you're not looking at the sky, what was it? Is that the gift?
Great. No, no, no. Great question. What I'm looking at is some astrology software. So I have your chart in front of me. I'm
Okay.
like, on the same computer with the camera. I have it. And I already looked at it for about 15, 20 minutes before we talked. So I could get it's something you read. It's not, so it's something I spent maybe 15, 20 minutes reading before we began. And also the
Mhm.
celebrities that Shanique sent as well to analyze a little bit too. So I'm looking at a chart which is basically a graphic representation of where the planets were when you were born and at that location.
So basically, astrologers just tell people, they just tell them about their personality or their habits.
We
That's
can
that's
go in
basically.
many different directions with astrology. I could talk about your relationship style. I could
Yes,
talk
let's
about,
do that.
you want to talk about relationships? Oh, this is exciting. I'm glad you want to jump in here.
Yeah,
Um,
because I wanna understand, because this is new to me. So I wanna understand, what exactly astrology is, what you do, and maybe the listeners, some of them probably know about it. Some of them sure I don't. So I
Fair
want to
enough.
see how accurate you are with the relationship
Okay.
aspect.
All right. Well, one of the things I noticed in your relationship sector of your chart is, you have some good, a sense of like some loyalty to a partner. I think you're good with actually being pretty steadfast in a relationship, pretty consistent with people. You also can be quite independent at the same time. And interestingly enough, there's an interesting, not a contrast, I would say here, on an emotional level. I think that you can feel things deeply, but you can also have a little bit of detachment emotionally at the same time. Like, for example, um, you might find in your life, whether it's people in your family or friends or romantic relationship partners of yours, that there are people who are much more emotional than you are. Maybe they cry, maybe they freak out, maybe, there's a sense of like you've got a lot of control over your emotions and you can seem very stoic. That's the word I would use. You are emotionally stoic. And what's interesting about this is that when I look at this in your chart and I think about, oh, how would this come off to other people in a relationship, like someone you're dating, or if you're dealing with a family member who's very emotional, you can be a little bit sort of above a lot of the heavy emotions that a lot of people might feel in a lot of ways. But you're very steadfast and you're a very loyal person, and you've got, like I said, this you stick with people really well. So there's a consistency there with you. You show up with people. And I think that if you ever found that there were some very emotional people in your life that were like, Marquise, why aren't you being more emotional? Like, because sometimes emotional people just want everyone to be as emotional as they are. I would say that what you offer people is you can be this like rock, in stormy waters, and you have this consistency where you really kind of show up in your relationships. Early on in your life, you may have been drawn to age differences in relationships. It could have been that you dated older people or younger people, but there's a sense of potential age differences too in relationships. Maybe it was more prominent when you were younger. That's another thing that I notice here. You definitely are. Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt. I wanted to get it straight. I didn't mean to be rude. So you said what my relationships with older people.
Or
You
you
said
may have been involved in relationships with older people. Like if you were, 20, maybe you dated a 28-year-old or a 29-year-old. There could have been age differences. And it can go the other way. Like as you got older, maybe you had relationships with younger people, but age differences is one potential way that the symbolism I'm looking at here, it's Venus opposed Saturn, how it can play out in people's lives, like what I see as a pattern. There's also, and that also makes you stick, like I said, you stick by people. There's a loyalty to you in your friendships, an integrity to you, and a consistency. Which I think is really helpful. You're also a bit in love with love. There's a romantic quality to you. This can be used creatively as well. A good creative talent in there. But one of the things about this aspect I'm looking at, it's Venus's conjunction with Neptune, they're about 6 degrees away, is that sometimes there can be this like looking at relationships, totally getting swept off your feet, having these rosy tinted glasses when you look at partners, seeing all of the ideals of another person. And then sometimes like, reality hits and the mundane part of relationship comes in, and then kind of feeling a little bit like poof. But there can be a little bit of this in love with love quality that you have, a very, very romantic chart in a lot of ways too. Yeah. Any questions about any particular things that I've said there?
I could think of a million of them, but you would definitely accurate, but without you would accurate in some aspects for sure. For sure, it makes me think.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you do these type of things with people you never met, like celebrities, for instance, or
Sure.
strangers?
Absolutely. I mean, you were a stranger to me not long ago.
Well, that's true. That's true. What about let me think. J Lo and Ben.
We can talk about celebrities. Let me look at my notes here because I took some notes on them. The only thing with celebrities that I have to be careful of is that the birth times are accurate, because there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet and you're like, oh, was she really born at this time or not? But I take that into consideration. So J-Lo and Ben, they've gotten back together again. I don't know how many years ago, a few years ago. And this particular year, J-Lo is having a good relationship year in her chart. She has Jupiter on her love planet Venus. I think things are going well in her relationship with Ben. This is when Jupiter's on Venus, it can be a time of feeling growth with a partner. It can be a time of having more fun together. It can also be a time where if you guys have had problems in the past, you can work on them and get through some of them. So that's really nice. It looks like J-Lo's having a good relationship year with Ben. The one thing I'll mention is that next year for a couple of months, and then 2026, 2027, Saturn is coming into J-Lo's 7th house of marriage. So the real tests with Ben are going to come a few years from now. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to break up. It just means that, they're going to have more problems that they have to deal with. A weak relationship certainly can break up under that influence, but they might have to work through some stuff. So I think that they're in a really good phase now, and I think that the tests are kind of yet to come a couple years down the line.
So from what you just said, that's an indication to me that you can tell the future.
I can tell. Okay, this is a great question. You ask really philosophical questions. I like where you go with how you think.
Thank you.
Future is co-authored by you. You are also in charge of your fate as well. So the question is, how much of this is fate and how much of this is free will, and how do they interact together? And I would say that astrology tells you what the weather is going to be like. Like, is it going to rain in your relationship? Is it going to be sunny in your career? But it won't tell you the outcome, because you determine the outcome through your free will. So if it's rainy in your relationship, do you remember to bring an umbrella? Like, do you work on, do you plan a picnic and have it ruined? You know what I mean? So I guess the way that I look at it is there's certain influences that are coming, but you can make choices to work with those influences. And you can sort of either weather the storm in a difficult period, or you can maximize a really lucky period too. So a lot of it depends on your free will as well. But I guess, yeah, does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Oh, excellent.
Also, because you said that we are. I don't want to misquote you. I should say rather. Did you say that we are in control of our own fate?
Yes, I see it like, okay, the chart is like a palette of colors. So if you're an artist, maybe you have pastels, or maybe you have like moody dark colors or whatever. So you're given these colors, but you can make any painting you want out of them. So on some level, there is something fixed going on. A pastel palette might be very different than like a darker, moodier palette, but you can also create and arrange many different things out of it. And that's where the free will comes in. So, and some things are set, but then there's a lot that you can work with. That's how I look at it.
Okay. So what do you say about people, or what do you feel about people? Well, let me change the question. Have you ever had any backlash or any conversations about God, believers in God, or Christians or preachers that say that what you're doing is evil and it's against what God says, and even maybe went as far as showed you some verses? Have you ever had that type of
Yes,
experience? And what was
absolutely.
the outcome?
Well, actually, I had somebody who was going to help me with my WordPress, like a WordPress tutor who wouldn't work with me because he was a Christian and he felt like this went against his faith. And there are people who think that, everyone is entitled to their own religion. I see astrology as working more with religion than against it. That's my own perspective on it. But if somebody believes that this is not right for them, then power to them. There's, God created them that way, and that's God created me this way. And I'm who am I to ever question God?
Okay, I understand that, but obviously, now do you know the Bible roots of astrology?
That is one interpretation, is that there are actually a lot of astrological symbols within the Old Testament and even in the New Testament. There's a lot. A lot of scholars have written about that stuff. It's interesting, like when the Israelites wandered the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, or 40 years, or 40. 40 is the amount of days that the planet Venus goes retrograde. Happens every 2 years. So there are a lot of number correlations with things. The three wise men and Jesus following a star. They think that could have been three different planets having this conjunction. There's a lot of interesting material on that, actually.
Okay, and I want to go back to another celebrity couple, but I want to ask you two quick questions before you go. We go there. Have you ever felt or saw something that you were scared to reveal to the person that was asking you? Like,
That's
have
a
you ever seen
really
terror or death?
That's a great question. Death is a very taboo subject in astrology. The way I approach it, if I were to have first of all, I would, when you look at the symbolism of planets, you can see crisis, you can see trouble. I'm learning medical astrology, so I'm learning to try to help diagnose people, help them figure out what's going on with their health, which has to do with your mortal body. If a client asks me point blank, do you think my parents or my grandparents are going to die because I need to prepare for things? I would never have the pride to think that I would know the definite answer to that. But if I saw some symbolism that could correlate with that, I would just give advice based on it and say, well, maybe this is a time to get the will in place. Maybe this is a time, to have that difficult conversation and start getting the estate in order and start making plans, because that's a good thing for all of us to do. And this might be the time to really focus on that. But I might have a guess, but with something like death, which, you could do a lot of damage to somebody by bringing up something. I have to be very sensitive. People come to me having been damaged by other psychics and astrologers who've sort of said the wrong thing. I would never want to damage anybody, but sometimes you have to have real conversations about things, because real stuff is, and difficult things. This is what I need to work with. This is like, I'm here to look at the harder side of life. So I would try to take my inclination and then give very practical advice, which is just good to do, based on that. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Do you Do you find that your customers are they mostly men or mostly women, or they're even balance?
Very good question. I would say there's a lot of women who are interested in astrology. That's something I've wondered for a while. Like, why are more women doing this? And I think that it could be that in a lot of major religions, there's not as much female representation. Like, God is often male. Saviors and messiahs are often male. So I do wonder whether women look to more alternative spirituality, because in astrology we have male planets and female planets. There's so much more of a diversity of expression, that maybe it kind of helps people find their place in the universe a little bit more easily through that representation.
What do you mean by female planets and male planets?
Great
What do you
question.
mean?
I love this. I'm glad that you're interested in astrology at all here. So there are the two feminine planets. The moon is considered the mother archetype. Venus is the lover, the planet of beauty. And these are the feminine, female planets. Like if I saw a transit to the moon in somebody's chart, I might say, oh, this could be a challenge with a woman, or you might get benefited through a woman, for example. The sun represents the male archetype. That's the father figure in astrology. And Mars is the other male planet. Like men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Yeah, I heard that saying. Yes.
And Mars is like the planet of action and battle. So these are considered more traditionally masculine or feminine things, but we all have every planet in our chart. So we all have different sides of ourselves that we express.
Do you I don't know if analyze is the correct word. What term or terms do you use when you're giving it's not a reading, right?
I
So
say reading. I say reading session. I analyze the chart. I read the chart. Yeah.
do you analyze yourself?
Yes, I do. But, I always like to get second opinions on that, because I'm going to be a little bit more subjective. The same way they tell doctors in medical school, don't diagnose yourself, go to a different doctor. So I go to astrologer friends of mine. I have mentors that I work with, and I get their opinion, because I might
Mhm.
be seeing things with blinders on my own chart.
Okay, I mean that makes sense. I guess you want to be as honest with yourself as possible.
Exactly. And I think I tend to just read things more negatively in my own chart, because I'm being like that in my own life. So I get other people's perspectives on my own. And I have some really great mentors who've been doing this way longer than me, that, give me those perspectives.
I understand that. So let's go back to let me see. Let's see who the world's always Ashanti and Nelly.
Oh yeah,
Since
Ashanti and
he's
Nelly.
about to have a little youngin.
Yes. So Ashanti and Nelly have something interesting going on with them this year. So
Hmm.
both of them in their charts have the moon, the planet of emotions, home, and family, exactly opposed each other. It's a really strong connection between a couple to have moon contacts, together. But what's they're going through a bit of a hard year, Ashanti and Nelly, because Saturn is transiting both of their moons, and Saturn is a challenging planet. It represents limitations and restrictions. So I think that this isn't the easiest year for both of them. I think that there could be problems at home. I think that they could be dealing with issues with maybe their parents. Maybe a parent is aging. Maybe there's just construction work that needs to be done on the house. But it seems like it's not like the easiest, most romantic year for them, but that they're sort of dealing with a lot of responsibilities at home. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We have years like that, right? Not in a long-term relationship, you're always going to have to deal with some harder periods and then some easier periods. But it's really just a 10-month cycle happening to them this year, where they might be more preoccupied. There might be a little more distance between them, for example, like if they're working away from each other a lot. But yeah, it seems like there's a lot of responsibility and challenges in the home front for both of them this year.
You can you tell if they're going to get married or not?
This would not be the year I would think. Well, Ashanti does have the moon rule her seventh house. I would have to actually look a little bit, I would have to look a little bit more deeply into their charts before I answered that question. It could be, it's possible in Ashanti's chart because the moon rules her seventh house of marriage. So there might be a sense of getting serious about things, whether or not they have the wedding. They might be having a lot of serious conversations like, how are we going to live with each other? How are we going to deal with the families? It seems serious and heavy, but sometimes marriage is serious and heavy. You know what I mean? It's not always like just the most romantic time for people. Like it's like getting your families together, and sometimes that's easier said than done.
Okay. So what would I tell? Well, I won't even go there right now.
Okay.
So you said that people have come to you and asked if their parents or grandparents were going to die or something.
Yes,
Correct.
I've had people, when they're going through a crisis in their family, that's a question that I've had before.
Now, do you believe, or has anybody have come to you and asked what their dead friends or relatives are saying to them? Do you believe that the dead can speak, or what? Maybe not literally, but communicate
I
to their loved ones?
definitely believe the dead can speak. I talk to my dead relatives quite frequently. I'm not a medium by profession, so I don't charge for this. I don't bring it into my astrology sessions, but on a personal level, I have a lot of loved ones who are on the other side, and I keep close with them.
So you said a media. So media is the ones between
The mediums, yeah, there's some professional
the dead.
mediums, and yeah, they're considered basically like a telephone line. I think that's an old-fashioned reference. I think everyone's in cell phones, and maybe the younger people don't know what a telephone line is. I don't know, but a link between the afterlife, people on the other side, and people who are living. I don't do that professionally, but from my own beliefs, yes, I can communicate with my own relatives. We have that connection. But there are some people who do it professionally and who are really talented. There's a group called the Spiritualists. The Spiritualists have a church. They're within the Christian tradition, a lot of them around New England, and you can actually go to their churches where they'll bring out a medium and he or she will give you messages from your ones who've crossed over. So if any of your listeners are interested in mediums, I would start with a Spiritualist church because they often don't charge. They ask for donations, and it's within a Christian context, which a lot of people in this country grew up with. And they're a great group to explore that stuff with.
Very interesting. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm going to ask you two more questions.
Mhm.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
And I'm going to let you enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. All right.
Watch out for them bobcats. So, how did you? I might have asked you this, but I'm gonna ask you again because I don't remember the answer if I did ask you.
Okay.
How did you get into this?
Oh yeah, you did ask, and I don't think I ever really answered it. How did I get into this? I studied academically the occult in grad school in University of Amsterdam, and so I was always interested in the occult, but I took an academic approach to it. And then in my late 20s, I had a reading from my mentor, Jamie Kale Miller, and I had an amazing experience with her. And then I asked her to train me. So then she trained me. We worked together for a number of years, and that's how that happened.
No, but what was the inspiration? Like, this is what I want to do. Like, what was that moment? Can you remember that moment?
It's more like, yeah, I think it was an obsession. And then when I realized that I could get paid for it, I was like, oh, then this is all I want to spend my time doing. It's an obsession. I live this stuff like every day. And I also really, I take classes. I'm constantly learning on it. Like I'll always be a student. I don't think it's like once it got me, I could just, this is what I do most of my day. How I think, I walk around the world and I think about signs and planets, and it's just yeah, it was an obsession. It still is.
Yeah, I can tell. You said that's what you do, but I get the impression that that's who you are. Because it's deeper than what you do. That's who you
I
are.
say that too. What I do and who I am. Thank you so much, Marquise. That's exactly how I feel. Thank you for listening. You're a great listener, by the way. Thank you for listening so deeply to me. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. You got to thank S Bird for that because she always say, "Let them finish, don't interrupt." So S Bird is brilliant. She teaches me a lot.
Oh, she's cool.
So one more question. We're going to end it off with another celebrity.
Cool.
I don't know. I don't know if in your field, it's not called prediction, right? Is it
Um,
called premonition or?
yeah, you can call it prediction, like yeah, you prediction is fine, but like I said, there is also a lot of room for free will as well. But I definitely, yeah, which celebrities are you curious about?
I want to know how you feel and the vibes you get about what's going to happen this year to Will and Jada Smith.
Yes, this one was really interesting. So Will has had a very intense relationship transit, which it's obvious. We've all been seeing it going on for the last few years.
Hmm.
And it's Pluto, which has been conjoining. I believe it was, no, it was squaring his Venus. Pluto is a planet of a lot of drama, and it can bring out a lot of intensity in things. Now, what's interesting is Pluto is going to be back on that Venus one last time later this year, September, October, November. So that's one time where more crazy public gossip might come out because it's like that is just going to be the influence is going to be its strongest there. And so that's been kind of an interesting one. Pluto can also bring about affairs too, interestingly enough, and sort of like people can look outside the marriage, either coming from him or from his partner, and we all know exactly kind of what happened with there. Now, Jada has actually been going through a transit with Neptune to her sun, the sun who rules men in her chart, where she's been really swept off her feet by a guy in the last few years. I'm thinking it's not Will, but I think she's going to be pretty disillusioned by him because that's the other side of this transit. We can be really, really swept off our feet and then just kind of like later be like, oh, what was I even thinking about that person? So I kind of hope she just sticks with her marriage because yeah, I think that her little affair is nothing stable at all in her life. And also just to speak about Jada's chart, she also looks like she's going through a low point in her career as well. Her home life looks like a bit of a mess. Saturn is at the nadir, the lowest point in her chart. So it kind of seems like she's not feeling on top of the world right now. Her career could start picking up in another 7 years, or she might decide to do something entirely new. I could kind of see it go. She either stays on the same track, stays in Hollywood or whatever, and then things will start picking back up again in a number of years, or she might decide to do a total switch now. That's sort of my prediction for her.
See, no or you didn't stop and think. You just kept flowing.
Blah, 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 blah. I talk a lot.
You no, but that's good. That's good. That's a good quality to have.
Thank
You
you.
mind if I ask you another question?
Please, please.
Now, in what you do, I'm sure that you have to have your emotions in check,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Because is it difficult? Well, this is not the question, but I'm going to add it. If you're angry, if you're hurting, if you're sick, and someone comes to you, is it harder when you're under those conditions to have a clear mind and answer them accurately when you're not right at the moment? Stomach's hurting you, you've been up 3 days.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. I think that because astrology is a language, there are always techniques I can fall on, even if I'm having a bad day. I usually just give myself more time to prepare. So, like studying for school, like I give myself a little more time before taking the test. I do think that affects psychics a lot more. People who rely on intuition alone and they don't have actual techniques to follow, they can really be thrown off if they're not feeling well and if they're having an emotional day too. So I often tell my psychic friends, learn some astrology because it can be consistent. It can be this language you read. So even when you're not feeling good, you've got some techniques you can sink your teeth into, and that can help keep you afloat. So actually, a lot of my psychic friends are really into astrology to help them, give them that structure and give them that framework.
Interesting. So I asked that question to ask this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know your political views,
Mm-hmm.
if you have any.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't want you to be partial for the next question that I asked. That's why I asked about your emotions and clear mind.
Right.
So I want your opinion or your feeling or your diagnosis or your prediction, however it's put, about the Biden and Trump election coming up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What can you astrology wise tell me about that, and not personal?
Good question. Personally, I'm an independent voter, so I don't play for either team. And and maybe that helps me be a little less biased. I don't know. It's kind of a duopoly in this country between both parties. I sort of think they both fail us in different ways, but maybe one less than the other, depending on your opinion. I would say that the type of astrology that looks at elections is called mundane astrology, and that's not my forte. It's not anything that I've spent too much time studying and focusing on, so I'm not the best source for that. What a lot of astrologers are saying who do practice mundane astrology is that I think the year between 2025 and 2026 looks crunchy, like the way the pandemic was. This is the opinion of other people who study this a lot more than me, but that's something I've been hearing a lot. My suspicion, my inkling is that Biden might not make it to the campaign, and I'm not saying he's going to die, but I'm kind of thinking he's not going to make it to that for some reason or another. That's my best guess, but like I said, this is not my forte.
I understand. So before we depart, because this is new to me, and then there might be some people that's interested.
Mm-hmm.
Could you rename the astrology colleges, if for lack of a better term, is that what they're called, astrology colleges?
Yeah, the astrology schools, yeah.
Schools, okay. Could you name them in case and their locations?
Sure. Well, a lot of them offer online classes. Kepler, Kepler, after the famous astrologer Johannes Kepler. They offer certificate programs. That's a really good one. I think that there's also there's an Australian school. I can't remember it, but it teaches a lot of traditional astrology. I don't remember the name though. I'm trying to think of another school or program. For people who are interested in it, classes are one way of doing it, but if you can find somebody to mentor you, I think that's a great, watching a more senior astrologer work I think for me, that's been the best way to learn.
So an astrologist doesn't need a piece of paper to show that they're qualified to do what they're doing.
I don't think so. I understand why people like to give certificates to show some level of knowledge in things. But, I'm the kind of person who just sort of thinks university degrees, that doesn't matter. It's really the quality of your own thoughts, the quality of your own work that should stand out. So I'm never impressed by anyone with a degree, not even a doctor. I'm kind of like, show me what you can do. And I think you can have that attitude with astrologers.
Okay. Well, I thank you for taking your time out on a Friday night weekend for being a part of this. And it was and again, when it came to me, a lot of stuff was very accurate. I will say that it was accurate, and maybe we could have it back on again another time.
I absolutely love that. You ask really good questions. You're a philosophical thinker. You're an excellent listener, and I really feel like you're open-minded and curious about the world. So this was a pleasure for me. Thank you for taking an interest. And yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you.
And you too. And if you don't mind, if there's anyone that want to get in touch with you, do you mind telling the people?
Sure, yes. So my name is Julia Mijas, Mihas. My website is www.juliamijas.com, or you could just Google my name and astrology and I'll come up. And I'm based in San Francisco. I can meet anybody over Zoom teleconference as well.
Okay, well, I'm sure somebody will get in touch with you sooner or later.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for being so open and I can tell you've been doing it 10 years because you just flow. You just smooth with it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You've been great.
Thank you, you too. And you have a good night. You have a good weekend and be safe.
Cheers. You as well.
Okay. Till the next time. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.